If you owned the entire Amazon rainforest, you'd technically be sitting on an asset worth more than the total yearly economy of most countries on Earth. Not millions, not billions. We're talking numbers so large, they stop feeling real. So today, let's actually do the math. What would it cost to own the Amazon? What would it earn you every year? And why is almost nobody actually trying to buy it, even though pieces of it get sold off every single day? Let's get into it. First, the size of what we're even talking about. The Amazon rainforest spans 9 countries, but the vast majority of it, around 60%, sits inside Brazil. In Brazil alone, the Amazon covers more than 420 million hectares. To put that in a picture you can actually see, that's nearly the size of the entire continental United States. You are not buying a forest. You are buying a landmass roughly the size of a country. So how do you even put a price on something like that? There isn't a for sale sign on the Amazon, so we have to build the value up piece by piece, the same way an appraiser would value any massive asset. Layer 1 is timber. Wood. This is the most obvious value, and it's actually the smallest piece of the puzzle. Timber production across the Brazilian Amazon generates real money, but researchers have found something surprising when they compared it to another resource entirely. Layer 2, and this one shocked researchers, is rainfall. The Amazon doesn't just receive rain, it actually creates it. The trees release moisture that forms clouds, which then produce rainfall across huge parts of South America, feeding agriculture far beyond the forest itself. One recent study put a price tag on this rainfall using agricultural water pricing, and the number came out to around $20 billion a year just from the Brazilian portion. That's about $60 of value for every single hectare, every single year, and get this, that number is roughly 10 times bigger than the value of all the timber harvested from the same land. The rain is worth more than the wood. Layer 3 is carbon. This is where things get really interesting from an investment angle. The Amazon stores an enormous amount of carbon in its trees and soil. Under current carbon credit systems, landowners and governments can actually get paid for keeping forests standing instead of cutting it down. Some programs pay around $4 per hectare per year just for preservation. Other more advanced carbon offset mechanisms have modeled prices as high as $10 to $50 per ton of carbon dioxide captured. Scientists estimate that transformative change would happen if prices crossed $20 a ton, because at that point, protecting the forest becomes more profitable than clearing it for farmland almost everywhere. Layer 4 is what economists call ecosystem services. This is a fancy term for everything the forest does for free that nobody pays for directly. Habitat for roughly 1/4 of all species on Earth, nearly 1/5 of the planet's fresh water, climate regulation that affects weather patterns thousands of miles away. One meta-analysis of dozens of studies put the combined value of these services, including carbon storage, water regulation, and ecotourism, at around $410 per hectare per year to local populations alone. Multiply that by 420 million hectares, and you start to understand why some researchers argue the Amazon's true value, if you account for its role in global climate stability, could run into the tens of trillions of dollars. Now, here's the twist in this whole story, and it's the reason nobody is actually lining up to buy the Amazon the normal way. The number that actually drives real-world decisions isn't any of those big global value estimates. It's something called opportunity cost. Researchers calculated that to preserve just 1 hectare of Amazon forest, you have to give up around $797 a year in potential agricultural income from cattle ranching or farming that same land. That number is small compared to the rainfall or carbon value we just discussed. But here's the catch. The rainfall value and the climate value are shared benefits, spread across an entire continent or the whole planet. The agricultural income goes straight into one landowner's pocket right now this year. That mismatch between value spread across everyone and profit captured by one person is the entire reason deforestation keeps happening even though the forest is worth more standing than cut down. Between 1985 and 2024, almost 60 million hectares of the Brazilian Amazon were cleared. That's an area larger than the entire country of France, gone, mostly for cattle ranching and soy farming because that immediate income was easier to capture than long-term forest value. Let's talk costs, because owning this land, even hypothetically, is not free. First, there's protection and enforcement. Illegal logging and illegal mining operations are a massive ongoing problem across the Amazon, and stopping them requires patrols, satellite monitoring, and law enforcement across an area too vast for any single team to fully cover. Second, there's the legal and political cost. Roughly 290 million hectares of Amazon forest currently need active protection status, which means constant negotiation with governments, indigenous communities, and international bodies just to maintain legal standing over the land. Third, there's the reforestation cost. Around 10 million hectares of previously cleared Amazon land has already undergone natural regeneration, showing the forest can heal itself if given the chance. But actively managed restoration, the kind that speeds up recovery and locks in real carbon credit value, costs real money in labor, seedlings, and monitoring across every single hectare being restored. Now let's actually try to answer the question in the title. What would it cost you personally to buy a piece of the Amazon? Raw, undeveloped land in parts of the Brazilian Amazon has sold, historically, for shockingly cheap prices per hectare compared to farmland in the United States or Europe, sometimes just a few $100s a hectare in remote areas with poor legal protection. That cheap price is exactly part of the problem. When land is priced based only on what crops or cattle it can produce, and none of the rain, carbon, or biodiversity value gets counted, the market tells you it's worth almost nothing. It's like pricing a smartphone based only on the value of its raw plastic and metal. You're missing basically the entire point of the object. Here's where it gets more complicated, though. A huge portion of the Amazon isn't actually legally for sale at all. Large sections are federally protected land, indigenous territories with constitutionally recognized rights, or conservation units managed by the Brazilian government. So even if you had the money to buy millions of hectares, in many cases there would be nothing legally available to purchase. This is a big part of why illegal land grabbing, called grillagem in Brazil, has become such a persistent problem. People fake ownership documents for public land, clear it illegally, and then sell it on as if it were legitimate private property. Let's go a little deeper into that illegal economy. Illegal logging alone is estimated to make up a significant share of all timber harvested from the Amazon. Timber that gets laundered through fake permits and then sold into legal supply chains, sometimes ending up in furniture or flooring sold internationally without buyers ever knowing its true origin. Illegal gold mining is another massive piece of this. Small-scale mining operations, often operating with zero environmental oversight, dump mercury into rivers to separate gold from sediment, poisoning water systems that indigenous communities depend on for fishing and drinking water. The frustrating part is that this illegal activity is often more immediately profitable than any legal alternative, precisely because illegal operators pay none of the enforcement, cleanup, or long-term environmental costs. They capture all the short-term profit and leave all the long-term cost for someone else, usually local communities and future generations, to deal with. That's not a forestry problem. That's the same broken incentive structure you see in a lot of industries, just playing out at a massive planetary scale. So who actually profits from Amazon land right now in the real world? Cattle ranchers and soy farmers profit from converting forest into agricultural land, capturing that $797 per hectare opportunity cost directly. Illegal logging and mining operations profit by extracting value without paying for any of the protection or restoration costs, which is exactly why enforcement is such a massive expense for governments trying to stop them. And increasingly, carbon credit programs are creating a new category of profit where governments, conservation organizations, and even private landowners get paid specifically for keeping trees standing instead of cutting them. This third group is growing fast because as carbon prices rise, preservation is slowly becoming more profitable than destruction for the first time in the forest's modern history. Here are a few facts that genuinely surprised me while researching this. Fact 1. Forests worldwide generate an estimated $250 billion in direct economic activity every year. But when you factor in their carbon sequestration value to the entire planet, some estimates push that number to $100 trillion annually. That's roughly equal to the entire world's yearly economic output, just from forests doing what they naturally do. Fact 2. The Amazon is home to more than 350 distinct indigenous and traditional communities. Any real conversation about owning the Amazon runs directly into the fact that millions of people already call it home, and have for centuries, which makes this far more than just a math problem about land value. Fact 3. Despite decades of deforestation headlines, agricultural GDP in Brazil has actually grown substantially over the same period that deforestation slowed down in certain years, which researchers say shows economic growth and forest destruction aren't as tightly linked as people often assume. Growth doesn't require cutting down more trees. It requires using the land that's already cleared more efficiently. Fact 4. Ahead of a major global climate summit hosted in Brazil, new financial mechanisms have been proposed that would pay countries directly for keeping tropical forests standing, treating forest preservation less like charity and more like a genuine financial asset class. One such mechanism modeled payments of around $4 per hectare simply for verified forest preservation, funded by a mix of government and private investment, essentially creating a brand new global market where doing nothing to a forest is the product being sold. Fact 5. Roughly 40% of the economic value studies conducted on the Amazon focused specifically on land inside officially protected areas. That means a huge amount of what we know about the forest's true worth comes specifically from land that's already shielded from development, which tells you something important. The most valuable parts of the Amazon, by the numbers, tend to be exactly the parts nobody is allowed to touch. So, what can a normal person actually learn from the economics of the world's largest rainforest? Lesson 1. Shared value gets destroyed by individual incentives. The Amazon is worth more standing than cut down for everyone, collectively. But the profit from cutting it down goes to one person immediately. Anytime you see a system where the group benefit doesn't match the individual incentive, that system is at risk, whether it's a rainforest or a company or a shared resource at your workplace. Lesson 2. The most valuable thing is often the thing nobody's pricing. Timber gets bought and sold every day. Rainfall, which turned out to be worth 10 times more, went completely unpriced for decades. Look for the value hiding in plain sight that other people aren't measuring. Lesson 3. Long-term value requires someone to actually capture it. Carbon credits only work because someone built a system to convert an abstract benefit, keeping trees alive, into an actual paycheck. Good ideas alone don't change behavior. Aligned incentives do. Lesson 4. Cheap prices often mean something important is being left out of the math. When Amazon land sold for a few $100s a hectare, it wasn't actually cheap. It was mispriced, because the rainfall, carbon, and biodiversity value never got counted. Whenever something looks unusually cheap, it's worth asking what value might not be showing up in that price at all. So there you go. A rainforest that generates more value from rain than from timber, protects a quarter of the world's species, and might genuinely be worth more than most countries' entire economies, all while sitting largely unprotected because the math never rewarded the people actually living on it. The Amazon isn't just a forest. It's the biggest case study in the world for what happens when we fail to price the things that matter most. If this video actually taught you something new, smash that like button. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more real breakdowns like this one, and drop a comment telling me what you want broken down next. Until next time, this has been MoneyBruh, and I'll see you in the next one.